So now getting into more about the transition of Nightwing and Richard Grayson being in a place where he is deciding to do some things different, very different, and on the surface it would seem like these are things that would only affect him, but at the end of the day I feel like there's some things he's discovering that you can't just throw away, because rather than Nightwing being an alternate identity that he matured into rather than just being a carbon copy of Batman, but rather at its core it's more so a manifestation of who he is and what he's become collectively from his years with the Flying Graysons, from his years as Robin, and even throughout his time as Nightwing thus far, which once again make it just much more than just an alternate identity. So let's get into that. But first, if you're new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to catch the spills every week, and don't forget to hit that bell up top so we can squat up in the comments for the first hour. Alright, so the first thing I want to touch on is just the idea of Nightwing as a symbol, because on the surface, Nightwing for Bloodhaven has been a symbol for the protector of that city, similar to how Batman is a symbol for justice in Gotham City. And of course, between the two, their methods are very different, with Nightwing's methods not being based so much on fear. But for Nightwing, much like Batman in Gotham, when it comes to Nightwing in Bloodhaven, for the people there who see either the criminals he stopped or seeing him doing pirouettes from rooftop to rooftop, and actually you can't do a pirouette from one rooftop to the other. He probably stopped on one rooftop, did a pirouette, and then jumped to the other building. But either way, you get what I'm saying. But within Bloodhaven, whether Richard Grayson is aware of it or not, Nightwing, this symbol which he has become, which is also who he has become, is a huge inspiration to many of the people of that city. And because of that, much like in any other instance, you really don't notice the impact of a someone or a symbol until that person or that symbol is gone. And we touched on part of that in a previous video where Richard Grayson burned down his hideout in Bloodhaven, and it was discovered by Detective Sapienza, who had taken Nightwing's suits because he had pretty much put together that Nightwing had more or less just given up. And he donned the costume and the name, pretty much thinking like, okay, black and blue, pirouettes, how hard could this be? Be a detective during the day, fight crime during night, and I don't know when this guy's supposed to sleep. He probably takes 5-hour energy shots like every 5 minutes. But we'll get back to that guy. But as far as Richard Grayson, and I'm calling him Richard mainly to avoid any confusion because we're used to knowing him as Dick Grayson, but at this current time he's changed his name to Rick Grayson, because even though at this point he only has a fraction of his memories, he often rehearses the parts that come back to him within his therapy sessions, which is a whole nother animal we'll unpack in another video. But with him going by Rick instead of Dick, which are both short for Richard, his government name, but it makes it much more like the same person making a different decision from the information at hand. And we've talked about recently his new crowd of friends, his new job as a cab driver, and really how he's been making most of his way without any assistance from Bruce Wayne or the Bat family, to whom many of which have come to see him to check on him, and even some like Alfred who have tried to even give him a little money to help him out, but even yet and still Rick decides to go in his own direction rather than return to being Nightwing. But also for him, things like being a cab driver help out, and not just by making some extra money, but it also allows him to drive around, clear his head, which for him has been like a bit of therapy on top of his regular visits to his doctor, which we'll get to another time. But even between his routes, he finds himself constantly stopping at this one storefront window that has a piece of costume jewelry that reminds him of his mother. And he intentionally revisits the spot because the memories he has from his childhood, pretty much up until his time of becoming Robin, those are the memories that he remembers the clearest. So in between stops, and very often when he's driving around clearing his head, he'll stop at this same storefront window and reminisce on the better times of his childhood when he had his parents, everyone was together and they were happy. But on one of these stops, when he's just looking in this window, some random dude attempts to mug him, really just assuming that he's gonna be an easy target. But for Rick, much like how his dreams, or the dreams that he has, bring back memories of more of the cloudy years in between, when this random mugger puts a gun to his head and Richard hears the slight click of the mugger's finger on the trigger, that sound alone instantly ignites a domino effect of his muscle memory taking over, and he beats this dude like Nightwing hasn't gone anywhere. But while this has happened, from his perspective, it's almost like he's blacked out and he's only just reacted. And I'm sure for the dude that's mugging him, he's fairly surprised as well, because he's probably thinking, man, these cab drivers, they done took it to a whole nother level. Like he thought since Nightwing was gone, this would just be an easy take. But man, you couldn't be any wronger in this situation. Like this guy was so wrong. Like not only did he end up trying to rob Dick Grayson, but 2, he's broke, so you really have got nothing. But 3, out of all the things that he don't remember, However, one of the things that he does remember, at least subconsciously, is how to beat somebody to sleep. So because of that, this situation wasn't working for the mugger, who was not coming out on top any way that this would have panned out. Man, that was a dumb mugger. Like, who robbed somebody who's window shopping at costume jewelry? He can't even afford costume jewelry. Like, what could you possibly take from that guy? Alright, I'm gonna leave him alone. But getting back to Detective Sapienza, who calls in Malcolm Hutch, who's deputy chief at the fire department, Zach Edwards, and Colleen Edwards, who also work with him at the precinct, but he calls them all to meet with him in the afternoon at Langley Point shooting range in Bloodhaven, because not only does he want to fight crime at night, but he wants them to join him wearing the previous Nightwing costumes. And you already know he got dibs on the newest one because he found him first. But when he proposes this idea to the three of them, they react like anyone in their right mind. They're like, no, that's stupid. You're gonna mess around and get shot. Our jobs are dangerous enough in the daytime, and we'd rather not double the odds of dying by doing this at night. And it's that, with the fact of being a vigilante to an extent, includes them taking the law into their own hands, so they decide to pass. But this doesn't stop Detective Sapienza from continuing as Nightwing and attempting to protect the streets as a vigilante and a detective. But so now, not long after that, Burl, who's the guy who gave Rick Grayson the job at Bloodhaven Taxi Company, one night when he's on the job, he goes missing. And he's told Rick before that this is one of the more dangerous jobs, being a cab driver, which Rick didn't mind. But when Burl goes missing, Rick immediately goes out looking for him, and it's then that he runs into the new Nightwing. And for Rick, initially he looks at him like, okay, is that what I looked like? And while looking for Burl, he doesn't really have any weapons on him. It's more like a tire iron and some rope that he found in the trunk. But what's interesting about Rick, even though he's no longer Nightwing and he doesn't really have the memories of the years of being a detective, his brain pretty much still works the same way. And in a conversation with this quote new Nightwing, and seeing that he has a gun and handcuffs, he figures out pretty quickly who he actually is. And rather than engage in all of that, Detective Sapienza doesn't really confirm his identity or give Rick much of any information, but rather he handcuffs Rick to the door handle of the car, letting him know that the guys who have his friend, they're pretty dangerous, and he's doing this for his safety because he believes himself to be more experienced. But I'm pretty sure most of us know, and not firsthand from being a superhero, but most so vicariously through the comics that we read, and the movies we watch, so on and so forth. But if you are a superhero and you're watching this video, I got a birthday coming up, so hit me up on that. But for the rest of us, I'm pretty sure that we're all aware that the vigilante gig is anything but something that anybody can just get up and do. And Detective Sapienza gets a taste of that with much assistance from, this thing called gravity, when he falls right into the hideout of this gang called the Niners, who have taken Burl, and he's literally seconds away from getting shot right after, because these guys can care less if you're Nightwing, Daywing, or a chicken wing for that matter. But also at this time, Rick, whose muscle memory has been kicking in, along with a few more of the physical things that used to come with being Nightwing, he makes his way into this location, which gets the attention of the Niners just long enough for Detective Sapienza to get up and start letting off some shots. And Rick, of course, takes this opportunity to get Burl out of there, while Detective Sapienza switches to doing things more in a Nightwing type of fashion. And at this time, as they were leaving, Burl even mentioned to Rick, like, yo, should we even help Nightwing? Like, there's a lot of dudes. And from seeing how the fight began, Rick was like, nah, he got it. Because from how the fight started, he was holding it down. And we find out later on that he did end up bringing these guys to justice when we jump over to Malcolm Hutch, and he's watching Vicky Vale report this information live from the location. And Malcolm knows immediately that this is Detective Sapienza. And we're aware that he knows this because Sapienza had already asked him, Zach, and Colleen Edwards, who are brother and sister, Zach and Colleen. I'm not sure why I felt like I had to clear that up, but okay. But Malcolm's aware that this is Sapienza because he knows he's out on the streets wearing the Nightwing costume and trying to clean up the city. But while Malcolm is watching this on the television, he gets a knock on the door, and lo and behold, it's Detective Sapienza, who looks like when he jumped in the fight, not only did he drop the gun, but also the concept of blocking, almost as if he won the fight by letting them hit him so much that they couldn't lift their arms anymore, and that's how they got locked up and went to jail. Just my guess. Let me know down in the comments how you guys think that went down. But when this happened, it didn't deter him from wanting to continue to be Nightwing, and in fact, it showed the others how serious he was, and it compelled the others to take up his offer and join him in the mission of cleaning up the streets of Bloodhaven, which have gotten a lot worse since the original Nightwing had initially disappeared. And out of this group of four, Zach Edwards, Colleen's younger brother, he's the most hesitant. He's an overthinker, which nearly gets him killed in the field, but luckily when they go out, Colleen plays it close to him so she can watch his back, him being her younger brother and all. But it doesn't take long for them to realize, even with it being four of them, that there's much more to being Nightwing than doing pirouettes and putting on a mask when it gets dark outside. But that'll do it for this one, guys. So now with this team that's just been assembled, they don't really have their names yet, and it's really just Detective Sapienza, the only one with a name, because everyone assumes that he's just Nightwing who's returned. And that's one of the next things they gotta figure out, because they keep calling each other by the first names, which is gonna be a whole nother set of problems if they don't fix that quick. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments. How do you think Rick Grayson will react once he sees this whole team? Because I don't necessarily see him being like, okay, well, Bloodhaven's your problem now, I'm out. Which would be pretty messed up. But let me know your thoughts down in the comments, and we'll do it again in the next one. Alright, later.